Before we discuss tactics, we're going to cover some terminology in order to understand the context and strategy involved. Because if you can't effectively analyze and communicate with your team, then you've already lost. Very briefly, the storm in this case refers to the area outside of the circle, which will deal damage to the player and pushes them towards the zone, which is the safe area inside the circle. Now I know it's called different things in different games, but for our purposes, I'll be calling them the storm and the zone. The drop. Dropping is very specific to the Battle Royale. However, it's almost always best to ensure that you can obtain some starting weapons. Depending on the experience you want to have while playing, you have two options. Hot drops refer to drops which have a high probability of enemy encounters. I recommend these for people who want that 24/7 action. You land and you either live or you die and go next. This high risk, high reward gameplay is for my adrenaline junkie brothers who don't mind getting their hands dirty for some early game loot, even though statistically it's not the most favorable decision. Cold drops refer to drops which are unlikely to have enemies and guarantee you're kitted for your first fight. I recommend these for people who are specifically grinding for wins, but be warned. Cold drops might leave you wandering around for 15 minutes only to be killed by the first team you fight. Don't be a doofus that runs figure eights around the same building looking for loot. If you enter a building, try to run a route that won't go through the same area twice. Efficiency is the name of the game. Once you have a weapon worth fighting with, it's time to focus on what's in front of you rather than what's on the ground. Don't spend a year looting. There's essentially two phases of looting. First phase is when you're capable of defending yourself from an early adversary. You might not have full armor, utility, or a secondary weapon, but you're capable of fighting back. The second phase is when you have full armor, some utility, and weapons with ammo. Don't be one of those idiots who's still hunting for loot boxes when you have nothing to gain from them. The real gains come from taking advantageous fights and looting the dead enemy team. Positioning. Positioning is a fundamental aspect of every game, but in Battle Royales it's incredibly important, and probably more nuanced than you'd expect. First, we'll discuss cover priority. Moving from cover to cover is significantly safer than running out in the open without a clear destination. Duh. When you make a rotation, have a destination in mind, and look for a route that offers cover. We can think about cover as having three types of complexity. Light cover gives you minimal cover and/or forces you to peek the same way every time. These sources of cover work when there is nothing else around or as cover while rotating to a new destination. A tree or barrier are good examples, but a single window of a house is also a good example since it forces you to peek through a narrow opening. Mild cover gives you protection from at least two directions and/or allows you to peek from multiple angles. Large rocks or walls are good examples here. They provide a larger area of cover than light, but we have the option to peek left, right, over the object, allowing you to play fights less predictably and making you harder to hit. Hard cover gives you protection from almost every direction. It may force enemies through a narrow opening in order to push you aggressively. Buildings are the best example of hard cover. They offer several locations to shoot from and they allow you to heal up with relative safety when you do take fire. Early generals understood the advantages that a hill could give an army even 1,000 years ago. It's something that's almost baked into our DNA at this point. We naturally understand that height equals safety. Height is the most important factor in a gunfight. When you have the option to take the high ground, take it and hold it for as long as possible. A documentary about Vietnam wrote, "A frontal assault against a fortified position is the most difficult assignment an infantryman can undertake. Statistically, the advancing military unit is at a 3-to-1 disadvantage. Give yourself those 3-to-1 odds and take the high ground." It can be tempting to jump down from a height advantage in order to surprise your opponent, but the element of surprise is not nearly as consistent. When we're assessing a fight, we say that a height advantage turns a piece of mild cover into hard cover. So we would say that an enemy fighting behind a wall at the top of a hill has the same advantage, if not better, than a team in a house at the bottom. There are three core strategies for taking fights. The Gatekeeper. Gatekeeping is a strategy that involves holding the edge of the zone as the storm moves in to pick off enemies who are rotating and forced to run into your fire or take damage from the storm. A third party. Also known as the Freeble-Deebler, a third party is when you attack two teams that are fighting. Both teams are usually so preoccupied that you can wipe both teams before they know what hit them. A third party attack is almost always optimal for the third party, except when it forces you out of a more optimal position into an area with little or no cover. An aggressive push is exactly what it sounds like. Push when you've cracked your opponent's armor. Knowing that your opponent must heal means that you can push up closer with little repercussion. Understanding the time it takes to heal is very important here. If you push directly onto your enemy just as they've healed, it means that the fight has become a 50-50 toss-up, and good players don't take 50-50s if they can help it. Rotations. The early rotate. Early rotations are when you move to enter a new zone long before the storm collapses. These are good early game when the circles are large. Even though the damage taken from the storm is minimal, the distance you need to cover to enter the zone is typically further and therefore forces you to make suboptimal decisions. Combining an early rotation with gatekeeping is a good way to pump up your score and grab a few extra kills. Late rotations are when you move with the closing storm wall. In this way, you can almost guarantee that you'll not be shot in the back. These are good for late game circles where cover is limited and it's more important to ensure that you're not taking fire from all directions. Okay, so you know when to rotate. The better question is, where do I rotate? We need to understand circle patterns. The circle pattern is programmed differently in most battle royales, but will always tend to move in the same direction. A circle in the northwest corner will tend to continue closing on the northwest corner. Doing a deep early rotate can ensure that you won't have to move far in the final circles when the damage from the storm is amplified. The danger crescent. When the circle closes, they often form a danger crescent. This refers to the space where the majority of players will need to travel in order to enter the new zone. If you're close to the edges, then late rotations are safer in those areas and sometimes more optimal. If you're near the center of the danger crescent, an early rotate and a gatekeep is your safest option and can net you several kills. The middle of the zone is not a great place to be. When you're in the center of the zone, you have to try and defend yourself from all sides, even when you're in hard cover. Taking fights is almost guaranteed to have a third party swoop in for the Freeble-Deebler. The final circle combines many of the tactics all into one place. Late rotations are very strong here, and patience is required to only take fights when you know you won't be third partied. Keep an eye on the team count. You're looking for that lucky number 3. Probably 80% of the wins I've gotten in Battle Royale are because I've caught the last team with an aggressive push after they've cleaned up the third place team for me. If there are only 2 teams left, and you didn't get the Freeble-Deebler, analyze the situation. You're in the next zone, and they are not. Keep them at bay for as long as possible, so they're forced to rotate with the wall of the storm. Do this by laying down suppressing fire and using utility to dissuade a push. Your enemy is in the next zone, and you are not. Similar to the other situation, you need to lay down suppressing fire and utility to cover yourself as you push into the new zone. Don't let the enemy force you into a late rotation here unless there's absolutely no cover to push to. Alright, now you understand the context and strategy of battle royales. Get out there and get some dubs. And while you're at it, leave a like, comment, and subscribe.
Big dub.
That's it. Take her home.